Hello, I'm Jared Scott, and I have the assignment of Week 9 API. First, I'd like to start by asking the question, what is an API? An API is an application programming interface. The application programming interface, or API, is a intermediary between two different applications. Meaning that one application can basically request information from another one in programming. It's a protocol that can be invoked with certain key phrases in JavaScript and, many different coding styles. An API, or Application Programming Interface, is a unified set of rules that allow exchanges of data between public databases, companies, open source websites, and internal databases for use by request. So, on behalf of a user, it will make a request for data and retrieve it to be utilized in following code lines. An example of this would be social media sign-in. You have a window, ask for your credentials. You input those credentials, and what the API will do is take all that information, send it, package it, and then send it to a database or a server to then get processed and return access or to a web page. That's just one example of API. API are everywhere. In like PayPal, by inputting your credentials there, and an API will take your sign information and make a request on behalf of your client. There's many different things that APIs do for us. As well, there are various types of API. First of which being Open API. An API is like open source, an API that can be utilized by anyone between anywhere and any two data locations, whether it be your system to a remote server or a database making a request to a different database. It doesn't usually require sign-in credentials or other things. It is a unified set of rules that most code systems will follow. It allows for smoother connecting and what's the word I'm trying to think of? Code that doesn't conflict with each other. Partner API is where two companies or competitors will share particular API that they can utilize between each other, like business partners. Say Amazon is working with eBay, and they exchange a request between each other. an API code between them will more likely be tailored for their particular code styles and their own developer teams. Internal API is where an API is coded to utilize databases or services and applications within a certain company, where a team of developers work closely with each other. And a composite API is an API that utilizes several API to for like one action reach out for information from multiple sources for a single action or a few actions in a single application. So, again, open source and publicly available through HTTP, like the hypertext, the hypertext protocol. Partner is shared interface between business partners that exchange access. Again, a company will share between developer teams access to their API, and they're able to tailor their services towards each other using that particular API. An API is almost a translation of sorts. An in-house interface that is to be used for a private database or within a company with close working developers. Again, to like Google has many different applications throughout its system, and its developers tend to work closely together. So you'll have an API that will reach to Gmail from YouTube, and that will use an internal API. So it's more tailored towards that particular company. May not be useful for, say, a partner company, but it works well internally. And then a composite is an interface that uses several API to get data from multiple sources. Say you're filling out a form and you have information from multiple databases, and an API can use, like, you can fill out your name, and then that API will use that information to go to several sites and get the necessary information as per whatever form you're trying to fill out. A composite API is more or less a multitasking API that for one particular reason can reach out to several databases. And now I'd like to move on to an example of an API request. Oh, sorry, I thought that was a pause. Anyway, moving on to this, going to move to a web, like my website, or a web page that I've just coded in specifically. So we have here a name, Luke Skywalker. This is a result of making a GET request or a FETCH request using the JSON method. So what happens is when I load the page, it pulls this name. Now I'm I'm going to show you exactly what this looks like on the HTML. It's just a simple script. And what this script is, I'll show you here. So this is the web page here. And now this is the JavaScript. And what this JavaScript is doing, this is a link to a database. And it's a API database specifically for data acquisition from an API. First, what I do is declare a variable for where I want my information to be outputted to on HTML, which is my data tag here. What I then do is declare an async function and declare a request from the URL that I've given. The fetch is invokes the API and is making a request to that particular part of the database, which is people1, being Luke Skywalker. And what it does, since it's an async, it will wait for a response before moving on. It will make a request, and then this particular code will wait before it will wait for that response to return before executing the next action, which is translating the API into a readable text form in JSON, which then take the name index from the JSON file and output it to my data tag, where it then shows up as Luke Skywalker. So that's an example of the get a fetch, JSON fetch API. While that's just one example of an API, there are hundreds of different API for dozens and hundreds of reasons. JSON has a few more methods. JSON is what you consider an open API, where it is an open source and utilized for free access databases or various applications. What it can also do is edit databases if you have access to it, and many, many different things. While there are many different examples of API and their uses, the GET protocol is quite a neat one, especially since I'm such a fan of Star Wars. This concludes my presentation. I am welcome to any questions that I would be able to answer. And if I don't have an answer to them, I would be happy to research them. Thank you.